A few weeks ago, we prayed for rain, and it seems like those prayers have been answered. But now the lawn needs to be cut and edged, and the gutters need to be cleaned out. In addition to doing all those things in the last week, I've also had a chance to visit with the sick and to have a few meetings and to prepare for our time here on Sundays. Sharing is how our gospel opens today, with the disciples communicating with Jesus their accomplished ministry workload. On Sunday, my first Sunday, you may recall that Jesus had sent the disciples out in pairs to cure the sick, to cast out demons, and to teach Jesus' lessons, to only carry with them sandals and a staff. As Jesus listened to their accomplishments, he quickly shifted for their future success, inviting them now to stop, to slow down, to return to God in prayer and reflection. Jesus says to them, "Come away and rest for a while." Now, make sure that you are fed too, fed with that earthly nourishment, but also with that heavenly nourishment by connecting with God. Their first adventure out into ministry on behalf of Christ must have felt like their first Olympic Games that they won, and they're ready to charge into the next competition event. Instead, Jesus says, rest, recharge, and reflect. Would you be so bold to say these words with me? Rest, recharge, reflect. Friends, we do this in many faithful ways. We do this for many faithful reasons. One being the emotional strain of walking with others in ministry. Sometimes they are kind and grateful, and other times, well, once I heard an Australian minister speak to a group of clergy. He told us, yes, we walk with our people, caring for them as sheep. And that image of a sheep is the soft wool and those really cute faces, this lovely creature all around. But then he reminds us from his experience of shepherding sheep and folks in his church that sometimes sheep bite. And when you're bitten, it hurts. When toddlers are without the words to express themselves and they're tired and they're hungry, they might hit or bite. When we too are depleted as adults, we can lash out with our words. You see, this animal instinct just like takes over. In my K through 8 school, where I was the last 4 years, we would teach our students that if they heard something that was said that was hurtful, to simply respond with the word ouch, a universal word for hurt. The gospel today reminds us that when we are depleted, we cannot be our best. The gospel tells us how the popularity of Jesus' teachings and his healings had not just been working through him, but now the disciples are going out to share in the efforts of bringing Christ into the world. And this is good news because God's kingdom is spreading. And ministry now does not just depend on one person, but on the disciples too. And then, as we hear in our story, There are all these other people who come to them on the shoreline, people who have followed them from coastal community to coastal community along the Sea of Galilee. And just to give you a little context about the Sea of Galilee, it's 8 miles wide and it's 12 miles from north to south. So even in the disciples' exhaustion, they recognize two things that Jesus does. First, his care for the disciples, and then his care for that crowd. You see, even Jesus, in his own exhaustion, is able to draw from the abundant disposal of compassion that lives in him. This shows the true divinity of Christ, the strength to let God push through him so that he could keep feeding others. The gospel tells us how Jesus had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Now, this image of a shepherd takes us back into the Old Testament, and I think still holds true for us today. In Ezekiel, we hear, I will feed them with good pasture. I myself will be the shepherd of my sheep. I will make them lay down, says God. Isaiah says, he will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather his lambs in his arms and carry them. And perhaps the most well-known is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the right paths for his name's sake. 3 weeks ago, holding a shepherd's staff in my sermon, you heard how the staff is used to both lead and protect the sheep from the various dangers of the world. Next week's gospel will speak to the feeding of the 5,000, pointing to the importance of our celebration of the Eucharist together, and also pointing to that heavenly banquet to come. But today's gospel highlights how self-care is necessary for us to be effective in our life, especially in our ministry for God. Having a time of reflection, reflecting on our experiences, enables us to process both the joyful and the hard ministry interactions along the way. We are called to be mindful, an intentional exercise of self-care from within. And this practice will help lead to a balanced spiritual life, a compassionate life. Author Vanderkalt, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, says this: mindfulness not only makes it possible to survey our internal landscape with compassion and curiosity, but actively steers us in the right direction for self-care. Friends, take time to rest. Take time to recharge. Take time to reflect. First, as a compassion to yourself. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, guides his sheep in the 12 disciples today away from having to go and to feed the crowds when they're not ready to do so, showing them compassion. Pulling from his deep divine well of compassion, Jesus is also equipped to care for the crowds. For his mind is clear and his heart is forever focused on God's work. He encourages these disciples to lay down in green pastures and to restore their souls. For when we surrender to rest, then our well of compassion can deepen too. We can find ourselves in a place of great safety where we're able to turn to Jesus to help find the strength that we need in our lives. And this can help us to recharge our compassion battery life and teach us through our time of reflection how to return to our work of ministry. This is very good news that we live in Jesus' care. And then Jesus' work will continue through us in our care for others. And only after our self-care is restored can we be Christ to others and help spread Christ's compassion in this sometimes exhausting world. Amen.